You people always think the rules don't apply to you. Officer Travis Hale's voice cracked across the federal courtroom like a whip, sharp enough to stop every conversation at once. The buzzing fluorescent lights overhead suddenly felt louder. A court reporter froze mid-sentence, fingers hovering above her keyboard. Somewhere near the back row, somebody's phone camera quietly started recording. At the center of the room stood a black woman in a charcoal gray coat, calm and motionless beneath the harsh white lights. Judge Alana Whitmore kept her hands folded in front of her body as Travis stepped closer, his polished boots grinding softly against the marble floor. The security badge hanging from her coat pocket swung slightly as he grabbed it without warning. He barely glanced at the name before tossing it aside. The badge skidded across the floor and disappeared beneath the wooden benches. "Restricted courtroom," Travis said coldly. "You don't walk in here unless somebody tells you that you belong." Alana looked at him steadily. Not angry, not afraid, just watching him the way someone watches a storm roll in from very far away. The silence unsettled him more than an argument would have. Around them, attorneys shifted awkwardly in expensive suits. A young black intern near the jury box lowered her eyes, already sensing where this was going. Travis reached toward Alana's head. "Take it off," he ordered. His voice carried the confidence of a man who had spent years believing nobody would ever challenge him. Alana didn't move. "Officer," she said quietly, "this is unnecessary." "Oh, now you want to talk respectful?" he replied with a humorless laugh. He turned toward the room, feeding off the attention gathering around him. Funny how that works. The courtroom doors remained open behind them, letting in cold November air from the hallway. Somewhere outside, distant thunder rolled across downtown D.C. Rain streaked against the courthouse windows in crooked silver lines. Travis pulled a small set of electric clippers from his security bag, and the low mechanical hum instantly tightened the air inside the room. Several people exchanged uneasy glances. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody told him to stop. Alana inhaled slowly through her nose. The sound of the clippers grew louder as Travis moved behind her. "Maybe this'll teach you some respect," he muttered. The first pass of the clippers sent a dark strand of hair drifting silently onto the polished floor. The room went completely still. Even the court reporter stopped typing. The only sound left was the steady electric buzz and rain tapping softly against the tall courthouse windows. Alana closed her eyes for one brief second. In that moment, she could almost feel her mother's fingers again, years earlier, sitting at the kitchen table in Baltimore while Sunday gospel music played softly through an old radio. "Never let bitterness rewrite your spirit," her mother used to whisper while braiding her hair before church. Alana opened her eyes again. Travis kept going, slower now, almost enjoying the control. Hair slipped across legal folders and gathered near the legs of wooden chairs. The smell of machine oil from the clippers mixed with stale courthouse coffee and damp wool coats. A white prosecutor near the front row smirked nervously before realizing nobody else was smiling. The young intern looked sick to her stomach. Alana remained perfectly still through all of it, shoulders squared, breathing measured, dignity untouched in the one place Travis could never reach. And somehow, that calm began poisoning the confidence inside him. The buzzing finally stopped, but the silence that followed felt heavier somehow, thick enough to press against every chest inside the courtroom. Officer Travis Hale stepped back slowly, breathing through his nose as if expecting applause that never came. Loose strands of dark hair rested across the marble floor like spilled ink beneath the pale courthouse lights. Judge Alana Whitmore reached up carefully and touched the side of her scalp for the first time. Her fingers trembled only slightly before becoming still again. Across the room, the young intern near the jury box quietly wiped tears from her cheeks, trying not to let anybody notice. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody spoke at all. Rain continued sliding down the massive courthouse windows, overlooking Constitution Avenue, turning the gray afternoon outside into a blur of silver and shadow. Travis clipped the guards back onto the electric razor with casual movements, almost annoyed now that the moment had passed. "Next time," he muttered while placing the clippers into his bag, "you will remember how this building works." Alana lowered her hand slowly. "I already know how this building works," she replied. Her voice remained calm, but something about the way she said it caused several people nearby to glance at each other uneasily. Travis noticed it too. His jaw tightened for half a second before arrogance returned to his face. Then maybe you should have acted like it. He turned toward the courtroom clerk, standing frozen beside a stack of legal folders. Get her escorted out. The older clerk hesitated. Her eyes moved from Travis to Alana and back again. Confusion flickered across her face like somebody trying to solve a puzzle under pressure. Alana took one quiet step forward before anybody could respond. Her shoes clicked softly against the marble. No, she said. I do not think I will be leaving. A nervous laugh escaped from somewhere in the back row, but it died instantly. The atmosphere had changed. Even people who did not understand why could feel it settling into the room. Travis walked closer again, lowering his voice. You really want to keep embarrassing yourself? Alana looked directly into his eyes. Officer Hale, she said gently. There are moments in life when a person reveals exactly who they are. The words landed harder than shouting would have. Travis felt heat crawl into his neck. Around them, the courtroom smelled faintly of wet coats, old paper, and burnt coffee from a vending machine down the hallway. Somewhere outside the chamber doors, a distant elevator bell echoed through the building. The young intern stared at Alana now with growing recognition. Her breathing quickened. She looked toward the portraits hanging along the rear courthouse wall, then back at the woman standing beneath the fluorescent lights with her head partially shaved and shoulders perfectly straight. Suddenly, the intern stood so quickly her chair rolled backward several inches. Oh my God, she whispered under her breath. Travis turned sharply toward her. Sit down. But the intern was no longer looking at him. She was staring at Alana with stunned eyes. At that same moment, the heavy wooden doors at the side of the courtroom swung open. An elderly bailiff stepped inside, carrying a folder pressed tightly against his chest. The moment he saw Alana, all color drained from his face. He stopped walking immediately. The folder slipped slightly from his trembling fingers. For one long second, nobody moved. Then the old bailiff straightened his posture so abruptly that his shoulder radio crackled. His voice shook as he spoke. Everybody stand for Chief Federal Judge Alana Whitmore. The room exploded into motion. Chairs scraped violently across marble. Attorneys stumbled to their feet. The court reporter gasped aloud. Travis Hale remained frozen at the center of the courtroom, his face turning pale beneath the cold fluorescent lights as realization finally crashed into him all at once. The sound of people standing echoed through the courtroom in uneven waves, chairs scraping backward, papers sliding from desks, nervous breaths filling the air where silence had ruled only seconds earlier. Officer Travis Hale did not move. His hand remained hanging near the security bag holding the clippers, frozen there as if his body no longer belonged to him. Chief Federal Judge Alana Whitmore stood at the center of the courtroom with rain-gray light washing across her face from the towering windows behind her. The shaved sections along her scalp were impossible to ignore now, but somehow they only sharpened the authority in her expression instead of diminishing it. The old bailiff swallowed hard and lowered his eyes respectfully. Your Honor, he said quietly. Nobody missed the change in his tone. It spread through the room immediately like electricity through wet wires. Travis blinked once, then again, struggling to force reality into place. No, he muttered under his breath. No, that is not possible. The young black intern who had recognized Alana first stepped backward slowly, one trembling hand covering her mouth. Tears still glistened on her cheeks, but now shock had overtaken fear. Across the courtroom, a prosecutor hurriedly closed his briefcase as if distancing himself from the entire scene. Another attorney stared down at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Alana finally turned toward the judge's bench. Every step she took sounded measured and calm against the marble. She did not rush. She did not glare. She simply walked forward while dozens of people watched the consequences of one man's arrogance unfold in real time. Travis suddenly stepped forward. Your Honor, I did not know who you were. His voice cracked slightly on the final word. Alana stopped walking but did not turn around immediately. Outside, thunder rolled low above the city. The storm beyond the courthouse windows had darkened the sky into deep charcoal blue, and rainwater slid down the glass like melting silver. That, Alana said softly, is exactly the problem. The words landed with devastating weight. Travis opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His confidence, so loud only minutes earlier, had collapsed into something smaller now. Something frightened. Alana turned toward him slowly. You believed dignity depended on status, she continued. You believed respect had to be earned through titles, uniforms, or permission. Her eyes held his steadily. And because of that belief, you allowed yourself to become cruel. Nobody moved. Even the air conditioning seemed quieter. Travis looked down briefly, unable to hold her gaze for more than a few seconds at a time. For the first time in years, the courtroom officer who controlled every hallway, every metal detector, every security line inside the federal building looked completely powerless. Alana stepped closer to the bench and placed one hand lightly against the polished wood. Her fingers brushed the surface as though grounding herself in something steady. The courtroom clerk near the side desk began quietly crying now, shoulders trembling while she shuffled paperwork that no longer mattered. Alana noticed her immediately. "Ms. Delaney," she said gently. The clerk looked up quickly. "Yes, Your Honor. Please compose yourself." The kindness in Alana's voice only deepened the shame hanging over the room. Travis closed his eyes briefly. He could still hear the buzzing of the clippers in his head, still see strands of hair falling onto the courthouse floor while people stood frozen around him. The memory already felt unreal, but the evidence remained directly in front of him. Alana reached toward the microphone at the judge's bench, then paused. Her reflection stared faintly back at her from the dark polished wood beneath the courtroom lights. She saw the uneven edges of her hair, saw the exhaustion in her eyes, saw pain she refused to let anyone weaponize against her. Then she lifted her chin slightly and faced the room. "Court," she said calmly, "is now in session." No one sat back down immediately. The order had been given, but the room still felt suspended between two different realities. One from 10 minutes earlier when Officer Travis Hale controlled the courtroom with smug certainty, and this one now, where every pair of eyes kept drifting toward the uneven lines along Judge Alana Whitmore's scalp. The rain outside intensified, rattling softly against the courthouse windows 30 stories above Constitution Avenue. Alana lowered herself into the leather chair behind the federal bench with calm precision. The movement was simple, controlled, almost ordinary, yet it shifted the balance of the entire room the second she sat down. Power no longer belonged to the loudest voice. It belonged to restraint. Travis remained standing near the center aisle, pale beneath the fluorescent lights. His security radio crackled faintly at his shoulder, but he did not answer it. His breathing had become shallow enough that even he noticed it. Alana opened the case file placed before her. The smooth paper rustled quietly beneath her fingertips. She read the first page without speaking, allowing the silence to stretch long enough for discomfort to spread through every corner of the courtroom. A prosecutor adjusted his tie 3 different times. The court reporter kept glancing toward Travis instead of her monitor. Near the back row, somebody slowly lowered a phone that had secretly been recording. "Officer Hale," Alana said at last, her eyes still on the paperwork. "How long have you worked courthouse security?" Travis swallowed. 14 years, Your Honor." 14 years, she repeated softly. "That is a long time to carry authority." He nodded carefully. "Yes, ma'am." Alana finally looked up. "And in those 14 years, how many people have entered this building dressed plainly, speaking softly, trying not to attract attention?" Travis hesitated. "I do not know." "No," she replied. "I suspect you do not." The words settled heavily into the room. Alana leaned back slightly in her chair. "This morning I entered through the public security checkpoint intentionally." Several heads lifted in surprise. Even the older bailiff looked startled by that revelation. Alana continued calmly. "For the last 6 months, this court has received repeated complaints regarding discriminatory treatment inside this building. Women followed unnecessarily. Young black interns questioned repeatedly. Defendants spoken to differently based on appearance." Travis stared at her in silence. The young intern near the jury box slowly sat down again, eyes wide as realization spread across her face. Alana folded her hands together. "I removed my robe this morning because titles often hide uncomfortable truths. I wanted to observe how ordinary citizens were treated when nobody important seemed to be watching." A deep quiet swept through the room again. Travis looked down at the marble floor where several strands of dark hair still rested near his boots. One piece clung to the edge of his pant leg. He brushed it away quickly, almost ashamed to touch it. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "I made a mistake." Alana studied him for a long moment. "No," she answered quietly. "A mistake happens by accident. What happened today came from assumption. The distinction struck harder than anger could have. Travis felt the words settle into his chest with unbearable weight. Outside the courtroom doors, distant thunder rolled once more across Washington. The lights inside flickered briefly before steadying again. Alana glanced toward the courtroom clerk. Ms. Delaney, contact Judicial Conduct Review immediately after. This session concludes. Yes, Your Honor, the clerk replied softly. Travis lifted his eyes quickly. Fear finally replaced denial completely. Please, he said, his voice barely above a whisper now. I never meant for this to happen. Alana looked at him steadily, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, genuine sadness crossed her face. That, she said quietly, is what frightens me most. The courtroom no longer felt like a place of law. It felt like a mirror nobody wanted to look into. Rain hammered harder against the windows now, washing the city outside into streaks of gray and white, while fluorescent lights cast a cold shine across the polished federal seal mounted behind Judge Alana Whitmore's bench. Nobody shifted in their seats anymore. Nobody whispered. The silence had become too heavy for small sounds. Officer Travis Hale stood exactly where he had been since the truth came out, shoulders rigid, hands hanging uselessly at his sides. The confidence that once filled his posture had drained away completely, leaving behind a man who suddenly looked older than he had an hour earlier. Alana reviewed several documents quietly while the courtroom waited. The faint rustle of paper sounded unnaturally loud. Then she stopped on a single page and looked toward the older bailiff near the side entrance. Mr. Garrison, she said calmly, how long have you worked in this courthouse? The bailiff straightened immediately. 28 years, Your Honor. And during those 28 years, Alana asked softly, have you ever witnessed complaints regarding discriminatory conduct from security personnel? The old man hesitated. The hesitation itself answered half the question already. Travis closed his eyes briefly. Yes, the bailiff admitted at last. There have been complaints. Alana nodded once. Documented. Some. Ignored. Mr. Garrison lowered his gaze. More than should have been. A painful stillness spread through the room. The young intern near the jury box pressed trembling fingers against her notebook. Across the aisle, a middle-aged public defender slowly removed his glasses and rubbed both eyes like he suddenly felt exhausted by something much larger than the hearing itself. Alana leaned back slightly in her chair. Officer Hale, she said, did you know my identity before this incident? No, Your Honor. Would your behavior have been different if you had? Travis answered too quickly. Of course. The words escaped before he realized how dangerous they sounded. The room reacted immediately. Several people looked down at their desks. One attorney quietly exhaled through his nose. The court reporter stopped typing for half a second before continuing again. Alana watched Travis carefully. Not triumphantly. Not cruelly. Just sadly. Do you understand what you just admitted? She asked. Travis swallowed hard. His throat felt dry enough to ache. Your Honor, I was trying to maintain order. No, Alana interrupted gently. You were measuring human worth. Her voice never rose, but every syllable landed with terrifying clarity. You believed kindness was optional until authority entered the room. Travis stared at the floor. The courthouse suddenly felt too warm. Sweat gathered beneath the collar of his uniform despite the cold rain outside. He remembered every moment now in unbearable detail. The sound of the clippers, the silence from the crowd, the look in Alana's eyes when she never begged him to stop. Shame settled into his chest slowly, heavily, like wet concrete hardening around his ribs. Alana folded her hands together again. This court exists to protect dignity equally, she said. Not selectively, not conveniently, equally. Outside the chamber doors, footsteps echoed faintly through the hallway as courthouse staff gathered quietly, already hearing rumors spreading floor by floor through the building. Inside the courtroom, nobody dared interrupt her. Alana looked toward the clerk's desk once more. Ms. Delaney, effective immediately, Officer Travis Hale is suspended from courthouse duties pending full federal review. The clerk nodded shakily. Yes, Your Honor. Travis finally looked up. Panic flickered openly across his face now. Please, he said quietly, I have a family. I have 2 daughters. Alana's expression softened for the first time. Not because she excused him, but because she understood the weight of consequences. Then I hope, she said gently, They grow up learning that power is not proven by humiliating people who cannot fight back. Travis lowered his eyes again, and for the first time since entering the courtroom that morning, he looked truly broken by what he had become. The hearing ended without the usual sounds of relief or conversation. No laughter echoed through the courtroom corridors. No attorneys gathered near the doors trading jokes before lunch. People left quietly instead, carrying briefcases and folders against their chests like shields while the storm outside darkened the city into early evening. Judge Alana Whitmore remained seated long after everyone else began filing out. The overhead lights reflected softly against the polished wood of the federal bench, and rain continued tracing slow silver lines down the courthouse windows behind her. Officer Travis Hale had already been escorted from the chamber by internal security, but the silence he left behind still lingered heavily in the room. Near the jury box, the young intern carefully gathered scattered legal pads with trembling hands. Every few seconds she glanced toward Alana, then quickly looked away again, unsure whether admiration or heartbreak sat heavier inside her chest. Alana removed her glasses slowly and rubbed one hand across her eyes. Exhaustion settled into her shoulders now that the courtroom had emptied. The strength she carried all afternoon had not disappeared, but it had become quieter, more human. Strands of uneven hair still clung lightly to the collar of her charcoal gray coat. She brushed one away absent-mindedly and stared for a long moment at the empty witness stand across the room. The old bailiff, Mr. Garrison, approached carefully from the side entrance carrying a folded courthouse towel in both hands. "Your Honor," he said softly, "I thought perhaps you might want this." Alana looked up at him. For the first time all day, emotion flickered openly across her face. Not anger, not humiliation, just tiredness. Deep, honest tiredness. She accepted the towel gently. "Thank you, Raymond." The old man nodded once, but did not leave. Immediately, rain tapped steadily against the tall windows overlooking Pennsylvania Avenue. Somewhere far below, sirens echoed faintly through traffic. "I should have stopped him," Mr. Garrison admitted quietly. "The second I saw where it was heading." Alana lowered her eyes briefly. "But you did not." His shoulders sank beneath the weight of the truth. "No, ma'am." Silence stretched between them. The courthouse suddenly felt enormous around two very small people sitting inside it. Alana stood slowly from the bench and walked toward the windows at the far side of the courtroom. The city lights below blurred softly through the rain-covered glass. She could see her reflection faintly now, the uneven edges of her shaved hair illuminated beneath pale, fluorescent light. For several seconds, she simply stared at herself. Mr. Garrison remained behind her near the aisle. "When I was 14, Alana said quietly, "a teacher once told me I spoke too confidently for a black girl." Her voice remained calm, almost distant. "I remember going home and asking my mother whether confidence sounded different coming from people who looked like us." The old bailiff listened silently. Alana touched the side of her scalp lightly. "My mother told me something I never forgot." She paused. "She said the world will always try to measure your humanity before it measures your talent." Thunder rolled softly outside. The city skyline flickered beneath sheets of rain. "Today was not the worst thing that has happened to me," Alana continued. "That is the tragedy of it." Mr. Garrison lowered his head. Near the courtroom doors, the young intern quietly wiped fresh tears from her cheeks while pretending to organize paperwork. Alana noticed her reflection in the glass. "What is your name?" she asked gently. The young woman startled slightly. "Mia Carter, Your Honor." Alana nodded slowly. "Mia," she said softly, "never mistake silence for neutrality. Most cruelty survives because good people decide discomfort is safer than courage." The young intern swallowed hard and nodded. The rain outside finally began slowing, leaving only soft droplets against the windows while the courthouse lights hummed quietly above them. And for the first time since the nightmare began, the courtroom no longer felt angry, only sad. By 7:30 that evening, the storm over Washington had faded into a cold mist hanging above the city streets. Inside the federal courthouse, most of the upper floors sat nearly empty now, the endless daytime noise replaced by humming fluorescent lights and distant elevator chimes echoing through long marble hallways. Judge Alana Whitmore stood alone inside her private chambers, one hand resting against the edge of a mahogany desk while the skyline glowed faintly through rain-streaked windows behind her. A small brass lamp cast warm amber light across stacks of legal files and framed photographs lining the shelves. One picture showed a younger Alana graduating from Howard University beside her smiling parents. Another showed her being sworn into federal office years earlier, her hand raised proudly while her mother cried in the front row. Tonight, those photographs felt strangely far away. Alana loosened the collar of her gray coat slowly and sat down in silence. The room smelled faintly of old paper, coffee, and cedarwood polish. On the edge of her desk rested the folded courthouse towel Mr. Garrison had given her earlier. A few uneven strands of hair still clung to the fabric. She stared at them quietly before looking away. A soft knock interrupted the silence. "Come in," she said gently. The chamber door opened slowly, revealing Officer Travis Hale standing in the doorway, without his courthouse jacket or badge. For the first time all day, he looked less like an authority figure and more like an exhausted man who had finally run out of excuses. His white uniform shirt was wrinkled now, sleeves rolled unevenly to his elbows. His eyes were bloodshot. He held a small cardboard box against his chest containing the belongings security had cleared from his locker downstairs. Alana studied him carefully, but said nothing. Travis stepped inside awkwardly. "I know I should not be here," he admitted quietly. "Mr. Garrison tried to stop me." Alana leaned back slightly in her chair. "Then why are you here, Officer Hale?" Travis glanced toward the city. Lights outside the window before answering. "Because I went home for 20 minutes, he said softly, "and my youngest daughter opened the front door smiling at me." His voice tightened. "She is 12 years old. Same age my oldest was when she started asking why people stared at her best friend differently at school." Alana remained still, listening. Travis lowered his eyes to the box in his hands. "I kept hearing your words over and over." He swallowed hard. "You believed kindness was optional until authority entered the room." The chamber fell quiet except for the low hum of rain against the windows. Travis set the cardboard box carefully onto a nearby chair. Inside sat a folded security jacket, courthouse keys, and the silver badge he had worn for 14 years. "I always told myself I was keeping order," he admitted. "That I was tough because the job required it." He shook his head slowly. "Truth is, I stopped seeing people individually a long time ago. I saw categories first. Threats first. Assumptions first." Alana's expression softened slightly, though sadness still lingered behind her eyes. Travis looked up at her carefully. "When I realized who you were, I thought that was the moment everything fell apart." His voice became quieter. "But sitting in my car afterward, I realized the worst part is that I would have walked away feeling justified if you had not been important." The truth of it settled heavily into the room. Alana stood slowly and walked toward the windows overlooking the wet city streets below. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the dark glass beside the uneven edges of her hair. Travis remained near the doorway, hands trembling slightly at his sides. "Do you know what frightened the courtroom most today?" Alana asked quietly without turning around. Travis shook his head once. "It was not what you did," she said. "It was how easily everyone accepted it until they learned my title." Neither spoke after that. Outside, traffic lights reflected red and gold across rain-soaked pavement, while the city carried on beneath them. Unaware that inside one quiet courthouse chamber, two people stood face to face with the truth neither of them would ever forget. The courthouse was nearly silent by the time Travis Hale stepped back into the hallway outside Judge Alana Whitmore's chambers. The overhead lights had dimmed automatically for the night, leaving long stretches of polished marble glowing beneath soft amber security lighting. Cleaning crews moved quietly several floors below, their carts rattling faintly through distant corridors. Travis paused beside the elevator but did not press the button. His reflection stared back at him from the dark courthouse windows lining the hallway, tired and unfamiliar. He barely recognized the man standing there anymore. Inside her chambers, Alana remained near the window long after he left. Rainwater still clung to the glass outside, blurring the Capitol dome in the distance into soft white light. She rested both hands against the windowsill and closed her eyes briefly. The room felt heavier now, not because of anger, but because truth always weighed more after it had been spoken aloud. A soft knock interrupted the silence again. "Come in," Alana said quietly. Mia Carter stepped carefully into the room, carrying a small paper bag from the drugstore across the street. Her coat sleeves were damp from the mist outside, and nervousness still lingered in the way she held herself. "I hope this is okay," she said softly, lifting the bag slightly. The pharmacy downstairs was still open. Alana looked inside the bag and found a folded silk scarf, deep navy blue with small gold stitching along the edges. For a moment, she could not speak. Mia shifted awkwardly. "My grandmother wore scarves after chemotherapy," she explained gently. "She used to say they made her feel strong again." Alana ran her fingers slowly across the fabric. The silk felt cool and smooth beneath her hand. "Thank you, Mia." The young intern smiled faintly, relieved. "You know," she admitted quietly, "when I first came to this courthouse, I thought everybody here was fearless." Alana looked up at her. Mia gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "Today taught me something different." "What is that?" Alana asked softly. Mia hesitated before answering. "Courage is usually the person who stays calm while everyone else becomes smaller." The words settled warmly into the room. Alana looked toward the rain-covered skyline again. "Fearlessness is overrated," she said quietly. "Most people who claim they are fearless simply have never been tested properly." Mia nodded slowly. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. The courthouse hummed softly around them like an old machine finally growing tired at the end of a long day. Then Mia glanced carefully toward the uneven patches along Alana's scalp. "Does it hurt?" she asked gently. Alana considered the question honestly. "Not the way people think." She smiled faintly, though sadness still touched the corners of her eyes. "Humiliation burns longer than pain sometimes." Mia lowered her gaze. "I am sorry nobody stopped it sooner." Alana walked toward her slowly. "You stood up eventually," she replied. "That matters." The young intern swallowed hard, emotion tightening her throat. Outside in the hallway, footsteps echoed once more. Mr. Garrison appeared briefly at the open chamber door. "Your Honor," he said softly, "Internal Affairs has officially opened the investigation." Alana nodded once. "Thank you, Raymond." The old bailiff hesitated. "There is one more thing." He stepped aside carefully, revealing Travis standing several feet behind him near the hallway wall. His eyes remained lowered respectfully. In his hands rested the silver courthouse badge he had carried for 14 years. Mr. Garrison looked uncertain. "He requested that this be returned directly to you." Alana studied Travis silently for several seconds. Then she walked toward the doorway and accepted the badge from his trembling hands. The metal felt cold against her palm. Travis finally lifted his eyes. "I cannot undo today," he said quietly. "No," Alana replied gently. "You cannot." The hallway fell silent again. Travis nodded slowly, accepting the truth without resistance this time. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away down the long marble corridor while courthouse lights reflected softly across the floor beneath his fading footsteps. 3 weeks later, the winter air outside the federal courthouse carried the sharp scent of rain and cold concrete as people hurried along Pennsylvania Avenue beneath umbrellas and gray morning skies. Inside the building, security lines moved quietly beneath the soft beeping of metal detectors and the low murmur of courthouse staff beginning another workday. But something inside the building had changed. The atmosphere felt slower now, more careful. Officers spoke more gently to visitors. Attorneys waited with more patience. Even the fluorescent lights above the marble hallways seemed less harsh somehow. Near courtroom 7, Mia Carter stood beside a reception desk holding a stack of case files against her chest. Her navy blue intern badge swung lightly as she watched people pass through the corridor. Every now and then, she caught small moments others probably missed. A security officer helping an elderly woman with her walker instead of rushing her. A young black law student being greeted respectfully instead of questioned suspiciously. Tiny moments. Quiet moments. But real. At the far end of the hallway, elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Conversations lowered almost instinctively as Chief Federal Judge Alana Whitmore stepped into the corridor wearing a dark wool coat and carrying a leather briefcase beneath one arm. The silk scarf Mia had given her rested elegantly around her head, deep navy blue beneath the warm courthouse lights. She walked calmly through the hallway, neither hiding nor displaying what had happened weeks earlier. She simply carried it with dignity the same way she carried everything else. Staff members greeted her respectfully as she passed. "Good morning, Your Honor." "Morning, Judge Whitmore." Alana returned every greeting with quiet warmth. No bitterness, No performance. Just grace steady enough to soften the entire hallway around her. As she approached courtroom 7, she noticed someone standing near the courthouse windows overlooking the street below. Officer Travis Hale. No uniform. No badge. Just a dark overcoat and tired eyes. For a brief second, neither moved. Snow had begun falling lightly outside now, tiny white flakes drifting past the glass against the pale Washington skyline. Travis stepped forward carefully. I heard today was your first hearing back in this courtroom, he said quietly. Alana studied him calmly. He looked different now, smaller somehow, not physically, but spiritually stripped of the certainty he once wore like armor. Travis held a folded piece of paper in his hand. Internal Affairs finalized everything yesterday, he explained softly. Termination. Mandatory bias counseling. Public disciplinary report. He gave a faint, humorless smile. Turns out consequences feel heavier when they finally belong to you. Alana said nothing. Travis looked down briefly before continuing. My youngest daughter asked me something last night. His voice tightened slightly. She asked why somebody who raised her to be kind could hurt another person just because they looked powerless. The words lingered painfully between them. Travis stared out the courthouse window at the falling snow. I did not know how to answer her. Alana's expression softened with quiet sadness. Then maybe, she said gently, that question will teach you what punishment never could. Travis nodded slowly. The old arrogance was completely gone now. In its place stood something quieter. Humility. Regret. Humanity finally forced awake. He folded the paper once more and slipped it back into his coat pocket. I am sorry, he said quietly. Not because you were a judge. Because you were a person. Alana held his gaze for a long moment before giving the smallest nod. Nothing dramatic. Nothing theatrical. Just acknowledgement. Behind them, courthouse doors opened and closed as another busy morning began. Life moving forward again. Travis stepped aside from the hallway entrance. Courtroom is ready for you, Your Honor. Alana walked past him slowly toward the chamber doors. Her shoes clicked softly against polished marble while snowlight reflected through the courthouse windows around her. As she reached the doorway, Mia opened the courtroom doors wide. All rise, the young intern announced proudly. The room stood together as Alana entered beneath the warm glow of courtroom lights, her scarf catching soft shades of blue and gold as silence settled peacefully through the chamber once more. And this time, nobody needed to ask who deserved dignity.